Absolutely. So when we talk about anything an autistic person has done, experienced, learned, gone into with either monotropic interest or a special interest of any kind, or even like hyperfixations, if you've got the ADHD flavor, if you have studied this, if you've done theater, if you've done improv, if you've done speaking classes, if you have learned even through monkey see, monkey do of mimicking people who are more charismatic and social than yourself to mask with that kind of brand, flavor, etc., you are going to have a different engagement with what is truth and how you lie, essentially, because you know that masking is a type of lying. Acting is a type of lying, but it is one that is socially acceptable, right? Masking for your job, saying good morning, is the socially acceptable way of being, even if that takes more energy than just going morning, right? The understanding of the mask as the form of social acceptability engages a slightly different and more nuanced experience. You may still have black and white thinking, but you have created a sort of if-then graph of potential options, so you have learned more nuance. So even if it's still a all or nothing thinking, you have created more nuance in your brain to look more like a shade of gray in understanding a particular context in which this is not perceived as lying and therefore is not in any way manipulative. It is simply the expectation of that space, right? So you may have a situation in which you say, okay, I understand that there is a certain amount of emotional labor required of a customer facing position, and therefore I will act within these parameters. As a chaplain, I do not have the ability to get angry or offended on the behalf of people in the same way when I am caregiving for them. I can be horrified by what has happened to them. That is not something I can express in that moment. I have to have a very controlled measure that I am not making their situation worse, right? So I have learned a very, very specific skill set in caregiving for people in ways that reflect compassion and care, while also understanding and being able to face the most horrific things people have experienced without flinching, right? And that is an emotional kind of labor. That is something I have had to learn how to do, and it is a skill set. As such, yeah, it is a form of lying in the sense that I am not showing them exactly what I feel about this situation, but it's not about me, and therefore that is not something I view as lying. Similarly, people would say, well, that's manipulation. Well, yeah, I've worked crisis response, for example. I've worked in unaliving hotlines, right, where people are calling in, and as such, I have learned how to essentially manipulate people out of choosing to do those things to themselves by helping them reframe and look at things. A lot of coaching is a form of mild manipulation. Not in the sense that I am trying to get them to have a specific outcome, but that I am manipulating their worldview so that they can choose a different outcome than the one they've chosen before. And it is manipulation in the sense that I am not coercing them, I am not taking away their agency, but I am shifting and manipulating like one might manipulate clay to make a certain shape. I am helping them find a new shape in the art they're making of their life, right? So these are things that you can learn about and create, and especially if you have trauma of your own, which again, lots of autistics do, but even especially in abusive situations where you have had to fawn and otherwise become hypervigilant with PTSD to other people's desires and opinions and feelings, you may have a very hypersensitive awareness of what everybody in the environment feels, which can be both a blessing and a curse, because it doesn't mean you know the social rules that go along with it. So for example, like me, I come from a very, very toxic, high control environment, and I became very good at reading what everyone around me needed. The problem is I am terrible at in-moment recognizing when there are social boundaries. I've gotten better as I've gotten older with it because I've learned the nuance of when I'm supposed to shut up about what I see, right? But if you are very good at fawning and you fawn in the wrong context, that can be seen as manipulation, right? Because you are meant to give a certain amount of deference in certain circumstances, but not in others. And if you do that in certain circumstances, you're going to set this person off as being manipulative in some way, or a kiss ass, or some other kinds of things. So just because we learn to be very hypervigilant around the needs and wants and emotions of other people doesn't mean we know the social rules in the moment and can apply them as needed, because again, they're not intuitive to us. And so it's like learning to speak a language, but you don't know all of the slang and all of the ways in which you are saying things that are technically correct by direct translation, but it's playing Google Translate sometimes, and it's not actually what that means when you say the whole thing. So yeah, that's kind of what's playing out here. It is nuanced. Your own experiences, your traumas, your interpersonal relationships, experiences and learning things explicitly, like doing speech or debate or any other kinds of things that have taught you specific frameworks with which you were going to engage the world, is going to give you a different and more nuanced view and potentially ability depending on your own autistic baselines. Again, not all autistics can mask in the first place. Not all are capable of doing that, and many are not capable of doing that over long periods of time without it having significant costs. So for like myself, I can mask for short periods now, and especially for caregiving context, but it still takes a toll with which I cannot do over long periods of time, where I am doing this every day for 8 hours. That's not something that I can endure, especially after years of burnout, as well as physical disabilities that affect my ability to hold and focus and energy over long periods of time. So for different people, it's going to be different, just because of their differences in their like neurotype baseline in general, but for others it's going to shift across the years depending on their own energy levels, their other comorbid conditions, their other issues, whether the trauma hypervigilance is actually helpful or undermining them in a given context. All of these kinds of factors are going to play together in a very, very complex web within your own life.